Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are unpacking a truly vast, ancient, and honestly a deeply practical topic, Buddhism. I want you to think of this journey like examining a massive, ancient tree. We're going to start right at the root, with a single historical figure. Then we'll move up to the trunk, which represents his core, almost medical-like diagnosis of the human condition. And finally, we'll explore the vast branches of tradition that have spread all across the globe. We're breaking down thousands of years of history and philosophy into clear, logical steps. So let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our mental roadmap for today. First, the life of Siddhartha. Second, the Four Noble Truths. Third, the Noble Eightfold Path. And lastly, the three main branches of Buddhism.
Section 1. The life of Siddhartha. To really understand the teachings, we've got to start with the historical roots of the founder.
So the absolute crucial point to grasp right away is Buddha isn't actually a first name. It's a title. It literally translates to the awakened one. Before he was the Buddha, he was Siddhartha Gautama. He was a real flesh and blood human being, a wandering ascetic, and a spiritual teacher living in the eastern Indo-Gangetic plains around the 6th or 5th century BCE. Grounding our story in his humanity is super important because, you see, he wasn't a god handing down commandments from the sky. He was just a person seeking answers to life's most difficult questions.
Tracing his journey, we see Siddhartha was born into the royal Shakya clan in Lumbini, that's in modern-day Nepal. Now, despite having this incredibly privileged, sheltered early life, he eventually experienced what's known as the Great Renunciation. He literally left his royal home and his family for the life of a wandering ascetic. He traded total luxury for mendicancy and intense meditation. And this journey culminated in his midlife awakening, where he attained nirvana at Bodh Gaya. From there, he spent the rest of his life teaching, eventually passing away around the age of 80 in Kushinagar, reaching what is called parinirvana, or the final release from conditioned existence.
Moving on to Section 2, the Four Noble Truths. This is where the Buddha essentially acts as a physician.
So I really want you to think about this. What was the Buddha's core realization about human existence? Like, what did he actually figure out under that tree in Bodh Gaya that forms the absolute bedrock of every single Buddhist tradition practiced today?
Well, the answer is laid out in 4 incredibly clear steps, known as the Four Noble Truths. After his awakening, the Buddha basically acted as a doctor, carefully diagnosing the human condition. Step 1 is dukkha, the truth that suffering is just inherent to life. 2 is samudaya, the origin of that suffering is craving. 3 is nirodha, the realization that this suffering can actually cease. And 4 is magga, the actionable path leading to that cessation. And this brilliantly illustrates a literal medical model, right? You've got the illness, the cause, the prognosis, and the cure.
Let's look a little closer at the first half of this diagnosis. Dukkha is the illness. It's the unsatisfactory, often painful nature of existence. We're talking about things like aging, illness, and unfulfilled desires. Then we have samudaya, which is the cause. The texts tell us that our unguarded sensory contact gives rise to craving and clinging to things that are impermanent. And this craving, that's what keeps us caught in samsara, that endless wandering cycle of repeated rebirth and all the continued suffering that comes right along with it.
But here's the good news. There is a way out. Nirodha is the cure. It's the complete cessation of that craving, which means attaining nirvana. The sources actually describe this as the remainderless fading away and relinquishing of craving, which finally ends the cycle of rebirth. But, how do you actually achieve that? Well, that is magga, the prescription. The Buddha didn't just diagnose our problem and leave us hanging. He provided a very specific, practical guide to wellness.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 3, the Noble Eightfold Path. We're moving from abstract philosophy into daily practical action.
So this path is grouped into 3 main categories. First up is wisdom, or panya, which includes right view and right intention. This is essentially about understanding reality and intending to act with real compassion. Second is ethical conduct, or sila, covering right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Simply put, this is all about not harming others in your day-to-day life. And finally, mental discipline, or samadhi, which includes right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Together, these offer us a super clear guide to restraining those knee-jerk automatic responses we all have, and cultivating wholesome states of mind instead.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that the Eightfold Path is not a linear sequence. You don't just finish Step 1, check it off the list, and then move to Step 2. Not at all. Instead, there's a set of interconnected principles that support one another, exactly like spokes in a wheel.
They're meant to be practiced all together to completely transform your mind, your speech, and your actions. It's designed for absolutely anyone, whether you're a monk or just an everyday person who wants to live mindfully and ethically.
And finally, Section 4, 3 branches of Buddhism. Let's see how that original trunk branched out.
Over the centuries, the Buddha's foundational teachings spread across Asia into 3 distinct yanas, which translates to vehicles. And a really fantastic way to understand these branches is by comparing their core motivations. On one side, we have Theravāda, which spread mainly to places like Sri Lanka and Thailand. Its emphasis is largely on monasticism and freeing oneself from suffering. On the other side, we have Mahāyāna and its subset, Vajrayāna. Their primary motivation is something called bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. This is the deep, profound motivation to attain enlightenment specifically in order to free all sentient beings from suffering. It's a pretty fundamental difference in their overall spiritual goals.
Let's look closer at Mahāyāna, which literally translates to the Great Vehicle. Emerging around 200 CE, this branch became known for its sheer inclusivity, welcoming a much broader group of lay people into the fold. It's also quite flexible with scripture, accepting new sutras, like the famous Lotus Sutra, that focus heavily on compassion, the emptiness of all phenomena, and the idea that absolutely everyone has Buddha nature. The ultimate ideal here is the bodhisattva, an enlightened being fully 100% engaged in helping others become free.
Now, to really understand how these different branches operate practically, we have to look at how they handle what Buddhism calls the 3 poisons, or dukkha sum. The Buddha brilliantly categorized thousands of messy, complex human emotions into 3 basic buckets. First, ignorance, delusion, and laziness. Second, desire, clinging, and longing. And third, aversion, aggression, and hatred. Everything from mild worry to intense, burning rage fits perfectly into this framework.
Let's move to the ultimate differentiator here and see how this builds across the branches based on how they tell you to handle those exact poisons. In Theravāda, the approach is pretty straightforward. Avoid the poison altogether. Just don't engage. In Mahāyāna, if you encounter the poison, you apply an antidote. So for example, you'd actively use compassion to counter hatred. But then we have Vajrayāna, which takes a radically different, almost counterintuitive approach. You apply enough intense awareness to actually transmute the poison itself into its pure positive quintessence.
That brings us to Vajrayāna, famously known as the diamond or thunderbolt vehicle. Primarily practiced in Tibet and Himalayan regions, it is a subset of Mahāyāna, but man, it has some highly unique characteristics. It emphasizes esoteric transmission directly from a teacher to a student. Practitioners use incredibly rich visual imagery, mandalas, and ritual tools like the Vajra and bell to represent the union of wisdom and compassion. Through advanced practices like deity yoga, they confront their inner obstacles head-on, working to transmute those poisonous emotions directly into enlightened awareness.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer today. I want to leave you with this really powerful thought from the sources. Awakening is not a destination, it's the path itself, walked with care and awareness. Whether you're looking at the historical roots of Siddhartha, the precise medical diagnosis of the Four Noble Truths, the daily rolling practice of the Eightfold Path, or the rich tapestry of the different branches, Buddhism offers a continuous, profound journey of awareness. So my question for you is, how might applying just a little bit of that awareness change the way you interact with the world today? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.